slowly coming in. Welcome all.
Hate that I prepared all this food.
What are we having?
Um,
That-
meat tray and cheeses.
Sorry, no sweaty meat tray.
Cured meats and cheeses.
I thought it might be nostalgic for all of us since we haven't had a gig tray for at least 4 months or whatever. I don't know. It's 4 months, 4 years.
What's the difference?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It- yeah.
Rumor going around town is that it'll be 10 years. So a bass
Word
player
on-
Hey, sunshine.
Word on the street.
Well, welcome everyone to the Austin Bass Hang presents Nashville Cats. Ryan, if you wanted to do a little intro on what the Austin Bass
Yeah.
Hang is.
Here we are, Austin Bass Hang. Guess we're in our 20th year. Austin Bass Hang is offered to string basses of any skill or genre living, working, or traveling through the city as a chance to meet with each other, share experiences, work through technique, gear, performance, and professional issues, or just hang. We've been doing this webinar. So this is our third installment of the webinar series, and this month we're traveling or virtually traveling to Nashville and going to talk with these Nashville Cats: Glenn Worf, Missy Raines, Mark Fain, Mike Bubb, Viktor Krauss, Ken Blanton. Welcome, friends, and welcome to our attendees. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, pretty much when we figured out when the world shut down, I was like, how are we going to communicate? So we went through all the different Google meetups and all that, and so we finally got a Zoom webinar, but we just decided to do these once a month things just to kind of connect with each other and do things that, bass players, we never get to hang out. So it's kind of fun. This is one of the, good things that's happened. This group of people can never get together. Everyone's so busy.
You can't book this band.
You can't put this band. I mean, here, I'll just read a short list of who you guys have played with. Ricky Skaggs, Del McCurry, Mark Knopfler, Lyle Lovett, Ry Cooter, Patty Loveless, Vince Gill, Dolly Parton, Bruce Hornsby, Bill Frisell, Zach Wilde, James Taylor, Sheryl Crow, Allison Krauss, Earl Scruggs, Sturgill Simpson, and you run your own bands, and just...
And that's just Glenn.
That's just Glenn. That's just the short list. So, and like I say, thanks for taking the time. And I think just if you want to start off, like why Nashville? For me, when I moved away from Ohio, I was like the two towns, Austin or Nashville. That's where you want to be. So, just wondering what brought you to Nashville, and if anyone wants to start. Missy, you're on the first one.
How about we start with Kent? He's got the most seniority on the Nashville scene.
I didn't have any choice in the matter. I was born, raised here, so I'm a native Nashvilleian.
How did you get into the music scene? It was just you born there, so you're just like, all right, it's kind of.
I started playing the guitar and the banjo when I was about 10 years old, and it really bass come around. I kind of laugh. I'm kind of almost a mimic of what Bob Moore did. I got into junior high school, and at school there was a bass in the band room, and I was playing drums, doing little just stuff, band stuff, and like, hey, what's the story on this bass sitting up here? As it happened to be, our band director was a bass player and a tuba player in college. And he's like, "Oh, I'll get that down for you. We'll get you a bow and get you set up." And I'm like, "Well, that's not quite what I was thinking." But anyway, he did. He got me a bow and he got the strings back on the bass. And so over the summer, you could take the bass, your instruments, you could get them from the school, release kind of thing. And so I got it, and the first week I had it, I was at the local little jam of old retired Opry guys up the road playing bass. In fact, Hank Snow's steel player, Buford Gentry, taught me basically how to walk a line. He said, "I here, do it this way." And so that's kind of how I got started in it.
Well, who else? How about Missy? You're in my Brady bunch. You're in the top of mine. So.
I'm in the top.
Yeah.
Well, for me, so I grew up in West Virginia, born in Maryland, just across the state line, and then grew up in West Virginia. And when I was about 18, just after high school, I moved to Virginia, basically because I sort of tried out a couple of other towns where I had job offers to play in a bluegrass band or two or three, and none of those worked. I went to Winston-Salem, I went to Cleveland, but then I ended up in Charlottesville, Virginia, where I did land a really great job with a bunch of fantastic guys, and ended up staying there for about 10 years. But then, and I met my husband there, and my husband is also, well, he's a musician, but he's also an engineer, and he wasn't in recording at the time, but he was actually a radio engineer. But he had this huge background of doing live sound and music and how those two worlds, interspersed. And he was thinking that he really wanted to become a recording engineer, and I was also thinking that if I really wanted to play music forever, that Charlottesville might not be the place with the most opportunity. I started thinking about where to go and started thinking about Nashville. But honestly, at the time, I wasn't convinced about Nashville. And so my friend and great bassist, Mark Schatz, he kept saying, "You have to move to Nashville," because he was here. And this would have been in the mid-'80s or late 80s. And he had just gotten here. And, of course, Sam and Jerry and Bela and all those guys had just gotten here. And so from me as a bluegrass player, at first my thought was, why would I want to go to Nashville? Because there's no bluegrass there. And folks like Mark were saying, but there is, and it's this kind of blossoming scene. And he kind of hounded me for a couple of years. I said, you really need to be in Nashville. This is where if you're serious, you really need to be in Nashville. And it coincided, as I said, with my husband's idea of wanting to be, pursue a career in music rather than radio. And so we decided to save up some money for a year and move. And we didn't save anything, and we moved anyway. And Ben went back to school. He went to Belmont University for a while. But when I got to Nashville, the best part of this story is the first time I saw Mark Schatz, and I said, "I made it. I moved to Nashville, just like you said." And he said, "You shouldn't have come." He said, "Roy's got all the work. You shouldn't have come." But it worked out. I'm glad I'm here. Nashville's a different place than it was then in a lot of ways. I like the way it is now a lot better than I did back then. But I was pretty lonesome for the Blue Ridge Mountains and being closer to the ocean and being an East Coaster. I still miss that a lot. But the community here in Nashville is my home now. So I really enjoy that.
Very cool. Yeah. Seems a lot like Austin too. It's very just inclusive. Like I moved here and everyone was just like, "Come play," and just very like I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I'd go play gigs and they're like, "Okay, here's the changes," and it kind of like trial by fire. But who else? Mark. You're next on my.
Yeah. Well, I was born in East Tennessee. about 3.5 hours away. And my uncles had a music store when I was growing up. And at the time, this was in the 60s, a lot of the bands from Nashville would come through our hometown, and my uncle would give them amps and stuff. They were the first Fender dealer up there. So a lot of people would stop by. And that's kind of how I got interested in it. I had met Merle Travis, and Tennessee Ernie Ford used to come to my uncle's house a lot, and had met a lot of musicians, you know. And I can't ever think of not wanting to do anything else. And I came to town, I guess the first time that I really came to town with anything music, I was 14, and some people were recording. Some friends of mine, they were older than me, and they would always come to town and hire the A-team. They would hire Lloyd Green and Jimmy Capps and Buddy Harmon, and Bob Moore or Billy Linneman would always play bass. So that's when I first came down, and I met Jimmy Capps, and Jimmy was really nice to me. Started getting me into Opry, and I started meeting people, and that's kind of how, you know, I had my whole plan from 6 years old on was to move to Nashville. You know, that was kind of my plan. I wasn't always into bluegrass and country music. You know, that kind of came later. It's growing up in East Tennessee, you play bluegrass by default. You know, that's what everybody plays, or old time country music. But I was more into, you know, the Beatles or the Byrds or jazz at the time growing up, you know. But that's how I ended up in Nashville.
You were destined to be here, it sounds like.
Well, I don't know. I can't do anything else.
So, Glenn, what brought you to Nashville? What was the?
Well, I'll try to spare you all the detours and poor choices, but or at least most of them. But when I was about 14, the first time I heard an electric bass live, and literally the way that bass cabinet or the bass frequencies hit my stomach, I thought, man, I don't know what this is, but I've got to have some more. So that was when I first tuned into the world of bass in any way at all. Skipping forward, I played all through junior high and high school. In high school, I got quite serious about pedal steel. It was really, I was playing bass before then, but I was really, really taken with steel guitar. And again, long story short, I wound up going to school for a couple of years, going to a music program at a state university up in Wisconsin. I'm from Madison, Wisconsin originally. I should have told you that. And I do owe a great debt to my hometown, because at least in the era that I was a kid there, because of the university, probably because of the proximity to Chicago, and just the fact that much of Wisconsin has a very rural population as well. I was exposed to every kind of music, bluegrass. The great blues artists used to come up out of Chicago. They'd play Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights in clubs in my hometown. I heard great rock and roll bands, great country groups. Eventually, when I left school after a couple of years of study, and I went on the road, played with a bunch of no-name, no-future bands, and began to figure out, okay, this is only going to end in tears. I'm going to be 45 years old, and the maid is going to be trying to wake me up so she can come in and clean the room. and which, there's been a lot of my life still gone back to that as far as that goes. But anyway, long story short, I realized I need to pick a place to go. I had a hard look at New Orleans. I had a hard look at Austin, a very hard look at Los Angeles. But because of my interest in steel, I think Nashville I'm going to roll the dice there. So I moved to Nashville to be a steel player, and I picked, it turned out to be fortuitous, but I picked the worst possible time to move there as a steel player, because nobody was cutting. Nobody was recording with steel guitar at that point. They were all trying to be pop. This would have been 1979. So I couldn't get a gig anywhere as a steel guitarist. And after a couple of years of just very occasional steel work, you know, I still get an occasional call to play bass, and I got more calls to be a bass player. After a couple of years, I finally realized, okay, I guess I am a bass player. And eventually, that's what I became, I guess. I'm not a steel player anymore. I sold my steel 30 years ago. I tell everybody I've been clean for 30 years. So, anyway, that's my story.
That's good. That's a good thing. No steels allowed in this forum. only 4 strings, maybe 5. Oh, Victor, you're the next on my screen.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny. I moved to Nashville in '92, and kind of like Blanton. You know, I'm from Champaign, Illinois, in a university town where we're exposed to pretty much anything musically. In my degree program at U of I was string bass performance for 1 semester, and then I realized I didn't really want to play in an orchestra. Didn't seem that was going to be my legacy, so I ended up finishing in composition. And a lot of us know Andrea Zahn. Her dad, Paul Zahn, was my main professor there, and he was very encouraging in terms of moving down to Nashville, and in terms of exploring like a I don't know, a career that could go beyond what I could do in Champaign. Also thought about Los Angeles for years as well, and yeah, it just ended up. So I moved down here in fall of September 12th of '92, and you know, and then also my sister was doing so well. She was kind of at the, you know, her career was blossoming at that point too, and so just kind of, you know, kind of hanging out or going on some tours with her, and realizing, well, this could be, there's lots of avenues that could happen here, and it just ended up being a good fit. You know, there's still sometimes, you know, like I kind of think of myself as a rock or a jazz player probably first, and you know, and I do play, you know, a bit, you know, I get invited to do country and jazz, country and bluegrass as well, and it's always rewarding too. And you know, but at times I think, you know, if Los Angeles would have been a good fit as well, but I do like it here, and I like the size of my house here, and the community, and you know, I can't see myself being anywhere else at this point in my life.
Yeah, taxes are probably a lot cheaper than LA too, I'm sure.
Maybe.
Maybe that's true. I know Nashville's exploding like Austin did.
Yeah, I think they're talking about a 34% property tax increase.
Wow.
Year here, which is perfect timing.
Yes.
Have so much work.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of bluegrass, Mike Bubb, how did you make it to Nashville?
Well, I moved here with a band in 1989, and I got started basically as a banjo player. I played banjo for a number of years and competed around and did different types of music through high school. I was playing. My guidance counselor had a band where we played a lot. I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona, and there's a lot of resort hotels there, golf hotels. And so they have a lot of conventions and stuff. And we would play all kinds of country music or bluegrass and Western swing, cowboy music. And so I was playing a lot of different kinds of music. And then the guy was kind of teaching me how to play banjo. He had a band that I guess the bass player couldn't make it or whatever. And he said, here's a bass and here's a tape of 10 songs. Go learn these. You're playing bass for this next week. And that's kind of how I got started, was somebody just put it in my hands. And just got started there. And then as things happened, I got out of high school and I went to 1 year of what I call Bluegrass College out in West Texas at South Plains College. Because for me, I didn't have any other plan of where to go. So I just sort of inched my way to the east During that time, I went out on the road for a while, and then I formed a bluegrass band out west. And as that started to snowball and pick up speed, we intersected with a guy named Chris Jones, who became our lead singer. And he was the first one that kind of pointed us towards Nashville. And he said, I'll come join your band if you guys will move to Nashville, or at least having an intention to move to Nashville. And so that kind of got the ball rolling. And about 1988, we came to the IBMA in Owensboro, Kentucky, and we got a record deal. And then we came to Nashville and made our record at Jack Clement's studio. And then about 6 months later, we moved to Nashville. And of course, after you move to Nashville, the band starts to splinter and everything goes, falls apart. But arriving here became pretty apparent there's all kinds of opportunity in this town that happens all the time. And so I was lucky. I pretty green when I got here, and I've learned a lot. And over the last 35 years, my travels have crisscrossed with everybody that's on this panel, actually, in some way or another. And I was able to fall in with some people that were my age and all sidemen with the guys at the Grand Ole Opry that played with the Osborne Brothers and Jim and Jesse and Bill Monroe. And of course, 92, I got a job with Del McCurry, and that really just changed a lot of things for me, both musically and travel-wise, and spent 13 years with him. And then after being with Del, all of a sudden it just, I kind of figured out that in this town, it's kind of hard to chase after something. It's better to just kind of let it come to you. So I spent about 2 years working at Home Depot, and then other things just started to manifest and happen. And so I started playing with other people and was able to quit that job and just freelance for the last 15 years, pretty much, doing all kinds of different things and recording and traveling and just doing it all, to survive as a bass player here in town. But yeah, 30 years. I'm going to die with my boots on right here in Nashville, by the way. I'm not going anywhere. I love it here. I love this town. I love the music, the musicians. I don't know where else you could go where you would have, just what you have here as far as opportunity, or just going and hearing world-class music of any kind on any given night in this town. Generally, you can hear some of the best of whatever you love to hear on a given night in this town. And there's no other place like it. So,
yeah, it's a pretty amazing place. Just stay away from Broadway for most of the part, though, right?
Well, you can say what you want about Broadway, but I play down there from time to time. I call it a workout when I go down there. It's a challenge, and it's hard work. And there's guys that go down there and they do doubles that play 8 hours down there, which would just kill me on upright. But I do enjoy playing down there from time to time, mainly just to keep your chops going. To play for 4 hours straight is like that is takes a lot of energy, and it's just like I say, it's a good workout. But then there's all the repertoire and learning those songs and just kind of getting them banked in there so that you can just somebody can call a tune, you just kind of know it by title. You may not know how it goes, but as soon as they start singing it, you know how it goes, kind of thing. So it's a good exercise to go down there. But yeah, I don't recommend it as a full-time living. It's it would be, I have enough ailments as it is.
It's kind of weird that I miss like schlepping gear and all that. It's like all these weird things that you miss, it's odd. But, just for everyone, like what attracted you to the upright bass? I know a lot of you started on different instruments, but what kind of, for me, it was Miles Davis and listening to Paul Chambers. I just wanted to do that. But then I picked up the bass, and I'm from Ohio, and like bluegrass instantly, like, all right, I can work playing bluegrass because it's, should be easy, even though, 20 years later, I'm still, learning how to play bluegrass. But this is just open question, whoever wants to.
I'll say when I was a teenager, we had a great performing arts center in Scottsdale, Arizona, and they had a great jazz series every year after year. They'd have all the jazz greats. And you could buy a ticket for $6 as a student. So I saw, so many great jazz concerts and terrific bass players, and like Milt Hinton. I remember seeing him, and different variations of a group of New York jazz all-stars that would come with different people. And so I was seeing a lot of upright bass in that setting. And I think I was attracted to it from there. Of course, leading down the road of listening to people like, Ray Brown, probably the ultimate tone on record for, any bass player. So, or any genre for that matter. So I was pulled to that.
Yeah, we strive to get Ray Brown tone and but anyone else?
Well, I'll throw in. I mentioned earlier that I started out on electric bass, and after I got out of high school and hit the road for a little while, I realized I didn't know anything about music itself. I was entirely self-taught at that point. I didn't have any understanding of chords or scales or key signatures or nothing. And so I snuck in to a great state music school in a town called Eau Claire. And they bent the rules, broke the rules really, and let me come into it. I had no resume, had no private training. They said, basically, pick an instrument and we'll put you on probation and see what happens. And because I had played electric bass, the closest thing that they taught to that was of course upright bass. So the little over 2 years that I was at that school, that became my instrument. And to be totally honest, I didn't really enjoy it. It was sort of a necessary means to an end, but I did not get the beauty of the instrument at that point in my life. When I quit school, went on the road, and then eventually wound up in Nashville, many years after I had already lived in Nashville and was already working as an electric bassist, I kept getting calls where people say, "Hey, do you play upright?" And I'm like, "No, not really." And they'd move on to somebody else because they needed to hire somebody that could do both electric and upright. They didn't want to hire two separate people, obviously. And about that same time, after getting some of those calls, a real dear friend of mine called me up one day and said, "I got this idea. I know you love playing blues. Let's put together a blues band, but play upright on it. Don't play electric, play upright." And I thought for a minute, all right, that sounds like a worthwhile challenge. And of course, as all of you know, it's just a bloodbath when you pick up that instrument and you start to immerse yourself. And you think, I know my way around this. And for me, having played it a couple of years in college, many years before, I thought, I can do this. But it was still, and still is, the ultimate formidable challenge, but also, as everybody in this webinar would agree, there's something so addictive about that sound and about having the instrument resonate against your body. It's about the only thing I pick up anymore, other than I'll still play electric if that's what's required for a session or whatever I'm doing. But I don't know why I was such an idiot all those years ago that I didn't take to it right away. I wish I had. I so wish I had. But anyway, here we are, all these years later.
You know what? I'll throw in. I've told Glenn this before. I had there was an upright bass that kind of sitting in the corner at my uncle's house, and I started playing it, and I played, really got into it for a while. Then I quit. And the really reason why I got into it to begin with was because of Emory Gordy. I was such a fan of those records, and I knew that he played both. And then so years later, I'd kind of quit playing upright. I didn't have a vehicle to carry it around and stuff. But then when I started seeing Glenn on TV and playing both, that is what caused me to start really getting serious about playing upright, by seeing Glenn play. And he played electric too. And that's really what I was when I came to town, was just an electric bass player. And then just kind of started playing upright again. And then ended up playing with Skaggs, and played a lot of upright. And actually, it was a country band when I started playing with Ricky. And he knew I played upright, so I ended up playing mostly upright in the country band for a while. But that wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for Glenn.
Oh, man.
It's your fault.
Forgive me.
I have a bigger vehicle now.
Yeah, our life revolves around bass for sure. Have vehicles and all that.
For me, it was, my folks were listening to bluegrass and early country long before I was born, and that's what they did for fun, was listen to it, go hear it live. So, and my mom was kind of obsessive about it, so that it was on the stereo all the time. So I sort of like, I don't remember a time when I didn't know about bluegrass specifically. So I started, but mostly what I heard were men playing and singing. So my first thing that I wanted to do or be was either Lester Flatt or Mac Wiseman, and I played guitar, and I used to, I had a there was my mom had a dust mop, and I would put the dust mop leaning up against the couch in front of the mirror in the living room, and I would stand on top of the ottoman and sing into the dust mop and pretend that I was Lester Flatt or Mac Wiseman, and sometimes Bobby Osborne, but mostly I don't know, I was leaning towards the other guys, guitar players. Anyway, I did that, and then I played piano, but and I never even thought about the bass to play it until my dad, apparently on a whim of his own, bought a bass for himself to play. And again, this is all news to me, because I didn't know that he even played anything. Like, I knew he enjoyed listening, but he never talked about ever having any kind of background musically, and I don't think he did. His mother played piano, but I don't think he really did. Anyway, he brought this bass home, not that one, but that one, and he brought it home, and again with the idea, I think, that for himself, but it was in the house, and you're a kid, and you just start playing it, and I just started messing around with it, and it clicked, and I gave up the guitar at that point. And so I just started playing it, and then there was all these bluegrass bass players that first lit my fire about it. Mostly Tom Gray, because he was playing because I grew up listening to records of the original Country Gentlemen, of which he was a part, and that's the bass that I heard. It was playing every single note possible. He was playing notes. He was walking every moment, and that, for me, that was really exciting. So that's what made me want to play.
Very cool. Yeah, I think George A. just
He did
interviewed
yesterday.
him for the
Yeah.
artist slap bass, which is very cool. Well, speaking of like bass, and I know, Kent, you have Joe Zinkin's bass, right? I don't. Did you want to talk a little about like the history of the bass players, like Joe Zinkin, Junior Husky, Bob Moore? It's like these guys that just were on every recording ever.
Well, I got to be friends with Joe really kind of late in his life. He had retired and kind of had been a hermit, so to speak. And you couldn't find him. You get the union book out and look his number up and call the number, and it wasn't him. There was no address. He had gotten soured, so to speak, with the music business. In towards the end of his career, in the early, I guess the late 70s was about the end of his professional career, and I got to be friends with him. Like I said, kind of late, but I've always kind of been drawn to that sound of the recorded Nashville bass. When I was coming up, even playing the banjo and the guitar. Of course, everybody, when you're a kid, here you listen to the Opry, and that was probably my first real draw to the bass was hearing Billy Lindemann on the Opry. And you turn big console stereo on, and there's this huge sound coming out of the speakers, live right out of the Opry. And then by the time I was in, high school, me and some friends of ours, we'd either get somebody to slip us in, or we'd slip into the back door of the Opry. And I'll never forget the first time I went to the Opry and rounded the corner, and you could hear this big boomy echo. It was like thunder coming off that stage. You couldn't hear anything else, but you hear Billy. And he had and come to find out, he had a big Ampeg back there with two 15s in it, just hammering that place from one end to the other. And that was the first real draw to me to the Nashville bass players. And then once you start with somebody like Billy, and, kind of get to know him and find out where'd you get your stuff from, Billy? Well, he'll tell you, quick to tell you that he started subbing for Junior and started subbing some for Joe on some of the television shows. Unfortunately, I don't remember too many of the TV shows. I think good old Nashville Music was still on when I was a kid, but some of the other syndicated shows had been already long gone. But that's where Billy, you see Billy in the mornings on all right. That's where I kind of got started with Billy, and then you find out about Junior Husky, and of course, when I was in high school, I got to know Roy Husky Jr. and enjoyed a great friendship with him, and discussing somewhat of his father's talents, and of course everybody knew who Bob Moore was. You played the upright bass, you heard King of the Road, and you know who Bob Moore is. That's just a given around here. And but then I guess I was probably late in high school years, and a couple other guys around that played bluegrass slap, and some, I don't even know where down the line I came across the name Joe Zinkin, and I talked to this one fellow that told me, he said, I met the guy one time. He said he was in the music store, and he said there was a bass in there. He said this guy got hold of this bass and absolutely tore it up, talking about slapping, and I was that really triggered my want to know more. Who is this guy? And then the more you try to find out about him, of course, then we didn't have the internet or anything, and couldn't find out anything. It's a real funny story. It's really illegal the way I found Joe Zinkin. At the time, my family ran a service station and a record service, and I had a real good working relationship with the police department locally. And one of my buddies was dispatching one night. I was hanging out there at the police department. And I said, "Hey," I said, look up an old friend of mine right quick on the on the NCIC, the Tennessee driver's license." And I gave him. I said, "I know there's not but one." I didn't know if the man was still alive, and he's like, "Yeah, sure." He types it in. The man born in 1916. He said, "God, he is an old friend, is he?" I said, "Yeah." And, so we got Joe's address, and myself and Leroy Troy, me and Troy grew up together. Man, don't put it past us. We just I said, "Come on, Troy, let's go over and knock on his door." And he said, "Yeah, I'm game." And he brought an old Roy Acuff songbook, had Joe's picture in it. So we go up there and knock on this man's door, and he comes around from the back of the house. He was mowing the grass, and he kind of put his hands on me. He said, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it." Like we're the law or something. But anyway, that was my introduction to Joe, and it was kind of a just knock on the door and see what happened, and it ended up being a real good thing. I don't want to take credit for it, but I kind of pulled Joe back out of not out of retirement, but I pulled him back into the circle of some of his friends that he had just You know, he'd left the music business really sour and turned off, and I brought him back, got him come to Opry time, and back to some picking parties and things, and he got to see a lot of people. A lot of people got to see him that thought he was already gone. But Joe was always kind of any of those older guys you talk to, Lightning Chance or Bob or any of them, they'll tell you, they'll say, well, Joe's the guy we got it from. You know, he was really the first serious bass player in this town, even though he was a comedian, you know, still doing the blacked out teeth and the funny hat and all that. He was the guy that kind of set the ball rolling around Nashville.
Well, thanks for bringing thinking back. It's a lot of great YouTube clips I think you've shared too. It's a good resource. But why don't we just listen to a little intro by him? Let's see if I can find it. Oh, sorry. Get in there. Talk amongst yourselves.
Got a pretty good bass face there going on while you're looking for it.
Oops. Sorry. Well, the intro's the good part anyway. He just made it look effortlessly, for sure.
Yeah, he always did.
Yeah, it's
Effortlessly.
yeah.
Which, of course, it is, right?
What was that, Kent?
He had hands on him. He had a hand like a monster. I mean, this man's hands looked like they're big as a dinner plate. I was like, no wonder he could, you know, his action was, you know, that high off the fingerboard. I'm like, how does this man do this? But you know, he was a heck of a player.
Mm-hmm.
That's Willie Dixon too. You look at Willie Dixon's hands, and they were you're like, oh, that's how he can get that sound. He just beats the hell out of it. But I know, Viktor, you're like, for you, your approach to bass is more like, seems, you know, you're into composition and I don't know if you wanted to talk a little about that, like your approach to bass style.
God. I don't know. I don't mean, I've done solo albums, but I don't necessarily think of them as bass albums. You know, it's kind of, it's just kind of a vehicle for me to be in the band and kind of write from that, you know, either writing from guitar or from piano, or there are a handful of tunes that are bass driven, you know, or started off as composition from the bass. I don't know. I mean, it's been such a nice, you know, playing behind people for so many years, you know, just as the nature of bass being an accompaniment instrument, you know, 97% of the time, or you know, or you can argue with that percentage, but you know, just on how, you know, thought of as bass and what lines as you're creating, you know, from an improvisational standpoint, is that, you know, you are writing the music as well, or you're the arranger as well. And I think just, you know, for me growing up, you know, I played both. I started on piano, went to trumpet, and then played, you know, started playing bass, I think when I was maybe 11 or 12, and then started off on the upright and then went to electric at the same time, about a year and a half later. And I don't know if I'm diverting too much, but I mean, it was just always amazing what you could kind of come up with just if you're just playing by yourself, or, you know, or noodling. And I think out of a, you know, to then write for other instruments and write songs from that, or primarily I write more instrumental music. It always kind of I think, started from that point of learning lines or coming up with lines, and then how does it enhance the song that I'm playing for, or how can I make sense or create an entire song from this idea? And I think we all do that as players. What benefits the song that we're involved in the moment, whether it be live or recording, and what can you do, what octave would you play here, or when is the ultimate time to come in, or what does it do to the whole song when you drop out, or there's a lot of drama, I think, just with the nature of the instrument being so low, and what it does, or what inversion. I mean, it's all stuff that we kind of do all the time. I think that's what, still after all these years, still think that's why I love this instrument so much, is that you're writing and arranging all at once, and it can just be one note, and that kind of shifts the whole idea or changes the whole scope of the song. Yeah, I don't know, Jerry, anyone could elaborate on that, I think. Yeah.
The good bass players, that's how we get work, right?
Yeah.
It's like play to the song, it's like
Yeah.
play what needs to be played.
Yeah.
Unless you want to, start your own band, then you can do bass solos all the time.
Yeah. I don't even want to do that when I'm doing my own band.
That's true. I was talking to my bass teacher from college, and we were both talking about just bass solos, and we were just like, he does a lot of classical, and just the repertoire for bass is just like, only bass players want to hear it, and they want to tell you how bad you played it. That's pretty much the reason for it, seems like. But, Ryan, did you have some question?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to point out to the attendees, even the panelists, really, they can just speak their questions, but to the attendees, we do have a Q&A, so if you have something to fire away, fire away. Speaking of that, DK asks, or says, really appreciate all of you taking the time to open up and discuss your careers and ideas. I think there's a common misconception that bluegrass, country, or roots music bass playing is simple or even easy, which, Victor, I think you just kind of spoke to that point. Just a single note can be all that the song really needs, and sometimes that's misconstrued as simple, but really it's musical, and you don't need more than one sometimes, if I can paraphrase.
Oh, yeah.
I can, so he goes on to say, I can remember a specific ad in a Bluegrass Unlimited magazine that showed a picture of an elderly person holding an upright. The caption for which read something like, "Tired of missing out on the jam? Learn to play bass." Ain't it the truth? Could each of you take a moment to talk about a player or players who opened up your eyes and ears to just how important, challenging, and impactful playing in these genres can be? Thank you. I think Kent kind of hit it on the nose with a lot of talk about Bob Moore and Joe Zinkin and so on. But anybody else have a really impacting bass player they want to talk about?
Well,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I had a few. Probably George Shuffler was one of my biggest. A lot of people don't know who he was. He played with the Stanley Brothers, and he was pretty much known more for his guitar playing. But I was really influenced by him as a kid, and just the way he played. I mean, I think he probably influenced Tom Gray too, and he was kind of the first guy, in bluegrass. And then probably is upright Charlie Hayden. I became friends with him, and just getting to spend a lot of time with him at his house and just playing bass and just talking about music. He would talk about music and trees, and just what he saw around him really influenced him. And that really opened up a lot to me to listen to what's going on around you. when you play music. Listen to the other musicians. It changes the way you play. And that's kind of been my approach. Not so much if it's simpler or harder or what. It's just to listen to what everybody else is playing. And Charlie really influenced me on that, because, playing with Ornette Coleman, that's what all of that was about for him. And, just the sound of your instrument, listen to that. He got so deep and so out there that a lot of it's hard to explain, but he was a huge influence on, the way I play and my sound, the sound I try to get out of my instrument.
What was always amazing to me about Charlie was he was one of very few bass players who was not afraid when it was time to do a solo. He would stay low. I mean, rock bottom register.
That's where he loved the sound.
Everybody else.
Yeah.
He wasn't afraid of that part of the instrument, and
he loved the sound. That's the sound that he loved. Yeah. That's what he thought of. He didn't want to hear it in a high register. He couldn't stand it. He didn't like it at all.
Yeah.
So but he could play up there. And if you were ever sitting around with him, he would play up there. But when it come time for a solo, he would never do that. Yeah.
Right. I always thought that was really remarkable, because he's about the only guy I can think of that would do that in a solo. Everybody else would head up to the unemployment zone.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a thought at you all. I will tell you that you mentioned Willie Dixon. Growing up in Madison and hearing all these great blues guys, and I was so into blues music as a kid. I didn't know who Willie Dixon was. I didn't know what a bass was at first. But when I began to listen to those records, it was, some of that stuff was downright scary. I mean, no other word for it. It scared me hearing this, and I didn't understand it. As the years went by, I began to realize, well, obviously blues, you can make the argument that it's a very simple music. You can say that about bluegrass. You can say that about country music. You can say it about rock and roll. They're all harmonically simple, but damn hard to play right. Any one of them, all of them. And I think that bass is one of those instruments where you can get caught up in the technical side. You can pursue technical studies, theoretical studies. You can, there's no end to how complex you can play the instrument. What has always been more intriguing to me, and it started for me with Willie Dixon, is how much emotion, if you do your job right, how much emotion you can bring to this instrument that essentially only allows you to play one note at a time, most of the time. And so I throw that out to the community, not just the panelists here, but certainly the panelists, but to the whole, anybody listening in. If you want to study it on a technical level and only that, and only study chops and incredibly dense harmony, that's great. It's fantastic. Every person to their own dream. But when somebody, I used to take great umbrage at this, when somebody would say, oh, country music, it's so simple. I would say, not if you're doing it right. Because if you're doing it right, you're not doing it from a technical level. You're doing it trying to find the perfect note, played with the perfect velocity, if you will, the perfect dynamic, and make that song come alive. And there is nothing easy about that. Technically, maybe it's not challenging. Emotionally, it all just comes down to why do you play music? And I don't play music. I would say nobody in this panel plays music to impress anybody else. We do it because it makes us feel something. And more importantly, or equally importantly, we hope to make somebody else, whoever's listening, feel something. I'll shut up now.
Preach it. You guys dead on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like for me, that learning curve of, because I was influenced first, mostly in the beginning, by someone who played a lot of notes per measure. And Tom and I have talked. We're good friends, and we've been friends for years. We've talked about this. He was influenced, as you said. I think Mark, did you mention George Shuffler?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was his biggest influence, and so that was that playing influenced me in the very early days, and I've talked to Tom about this. Like, it actually clouded a lot of how I played early on. I wasn't thinking about supporting, and he says he wasn't either. Like, he wasn't thinking about it in those early days. So I feel like I kind of saw the light much later, and through players like Todd Phillips that I got exposed to later. A lot more jazz players, and then when I came to this town, folks like Mike Bubb, and who I think have been, the risk of putting words in your mouth, Mike, but influenced by Roy and Junior Husky and all those guys who were influenced by all the other guys that we've talked about. But it wasn't really until I got to be 10 years into my playing that I realized how important supporting what was happening was the most important thing, and you could do that much better in some cases with just fewer notes, and not always. I mean, like, the great walking lines can have groove and all that, but I didn't respect the Route 5 thing. I didn't realize how freaking hard it is to do it right until later, and much later. So that's something that I've always looked up to folks like Mike, and that when I came to town, I realized it was like, oh yeah, this is a whole world that I need to pay attention to, and have gotten it. It's been my, what I've pursued ever since.
I know. I kind of have a follow-up to that now that we're talking about it. I came up as a bluegrass player initially. I was kind of a punk rock bluegrass band that I was in, so I don't know if it's traditional bluegrass so much. But so I learned two beat right away, and that's all I was doing for a couple of years, even into the jazz world. And I was really into Louis Valla, that was playing with the early Django stuff. And his two feel is it's beyond amazing. It's so dead on, and it's what you're talking about, Missy. People can't do it. I've gotten a lot of people to sub my gigs that are predominantly two-beat gigs in the jazz world, and these guys are highly educated, far more educated than I am, as far as academic bass playing goes. But they can't play two-beat. They can't swing themselves out of a wet paper bag in two, and so I'd be really interested to hear what you guys might like, where you're, like, where did you pick up, like, who were your Louis Vollas? Like, who did you hear playing two that said that's two beat right there?
Well, for me, it was coming to Nashville. You get up to speed real quick on, at that time when I came, of course, Roy was at the forefront of everything. Roy was playing on Alan Jackson's records, and there was still upright bass on almost every country session here in town, or at least a tic-tac and upright on a lot of those records at that time, and really did it up until his passing. But when you hear somebody like Roy Husky in a small room like Station Inn or something, and you just see how he feels it, like he's not overthinking anything. He's just got a feel for the room and the band that he's playing with and the song that he's playing. And it's such a a great thing to observe. And like Kent said, when you go to the Opry back then and you'd hear Billy Linneman just the sound of that bass was the anchor for everything there. Even on the radio, you could hear it. And such a huge presence. And you get up to speed real quick on, it's a feel and it's a sound and it's a tone and it's there's all kinds of different ways to play the bass. And you figure this out, that there's long notes, there's short notes. And in bluegrass, you can really control the feel of a song from just being like every other song to giving each song its own individual feel. And I like to steer people to Jimmy Martin's Widowmaker, the original cut of Widowmaker. I think it's Light and the Chance playing on it, but the bass notes are so short, they're like snaps of a finger. And they're just like don't, like a clock. But then you listen to something like Uncle Pen by Bill Monroe, and the bass notes are long, and it's more of a swing feel, and it has, and I also tell people, where a bluegrass guitar player will put a capo on, a lot of flat pick type players, you say the key of E, they'll always put a capo on, and they'll play out of the D position. But an old school bluegrass guy will know that if you play an open E, where you get a full broad strum of the guitar, it's going to change the entire feel of a song just by how you play what type of chords you decide to play on it. And the bass interacts with that so much, and you have to be aware of that. And that's something that you have to kind of learn from experience, to give every song sort of its point in how it feels, And a lot of times the lyrics will tell you exactly how to play the song if you just take a look at the lyrics, and it'll tell you to walk the bass when it's time to walk the bass. If that's what they're talking about, do it. It might work in there. So there's a lot of little things that you kind of pick up on, and you can steer a song a certain way or a certain feel. And the bass player actually can do that. You control a lot of that, And it's kind of a neat thing. And part of it too is that you really have to study repertoire. And it's hard for a bass player because we're constantly having to listen to music of all kinds. If you're going to be, if you're not just going to concentrate on one particular genre, but you have to listen to a lot of music and take it all in. And part of it is learning that repertoire, or at least digesting it so you can play it by feel, and hopefully eventually become very intuitive as a player, and that's just a hard thing, but it takes experience. And being here in Nashville, I always tell people, if you want to learn how to get along with people, play the bass. You'll play with everybody. You'll play with all kinds of people in this town. You could be playing with the most radical activist you've ever been around, all the way to the most, gospel Christian televised thing. You just don't know. You could play anywhere in between all of that, playing the bass. And it's a wonderful thing as far as, and somebody who loves to play music and be immersed in it. It's amazing where you can go in all these different directions. But I always like the fact that the bass is kind of can kind of set the feel of a song, and be a part of that process. And if you listen to, of course, all the greats, Bob Moore, what he did between Tom T. Hall records and George Jones records, and so on and so forth. It just there's just so many little things about the nuance of his playing that there's so much to learn from. Just key little phrases that would come up individually for each song. Like take for instance, Old Dogs Children Watermelon Wine. They just play that real simple down, 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 down. It's just a real simple phrase, but somebody had to come up with that, and it became sort of a signature for a song that just doesn't have a solo in it. That's it, just leads you into the lyric. And so those little things are just so important to learn and find ways to contribute in some way like that, and it all comes in the bass, seems like, I don't know, a lot of listening.
I know that's right.
Hey, I don't want to interrupt. I gotta take 5. I'll be back. Bear with me.
All right.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think we were just talking about the note length and all that. And it's just one of those things, or behind the beat, in front of the beat. I mean, it's like endless. You could, it's a endless journey for sure.
I do like thinking about the durations of notes, like within a tune, as a like kind of likening like the length of your note can be. What I've taught students, I've often talked about like the shortness of a note. You can kind of think of it in this, if you're not working with a drummer, a short note could be equivalent to a hi-hat, and a longer note could be a ride cymbal to denote different sections. You might think of as on a chorus, you might make the notes a little longer, and then the same ways, choosing what octave. The high octave, it's going to be a shorter envelope, and a lot of the time, and just like, so you might want to close it in and have the verses be tight again, and then open them back up on the chorus, or even do another treatment on the bridge. It's just those are fun tricks.
Talking about that, I had a real learning experience when I worked for Jesse McReynolds. I worked for him for about 5 years, and of course Jesse's a world-renowned mandolin player, just off the charts, that guy. The stuff he plays, but playing in his band, and Mike will attest to this, Jesse likes to really push when he's playing a break on the mandolin. So man, it starts, here we go to the races, and you've got to know that, because you have to space your notes out a little bit longer, kind of hold everything back, and then when he would go to sing, he would concentrate more on his singing, less on his chop. So everything would start falling back, and you had to step up and push. It was always a kind of a challenge, but it was fun. It was something when you finally learned the curve of it. It was a little bit of not a game, but it just made it interesting. Let's make sure everything stays in check today, and that was an interesting gig, to say the least, there for a while. And the other thing I was going to comment about where guys lay the notes. I've always been bad about Gurman the guys at the opera. The old 18 guys, and even the stars. And I asked Jim Ed Brown one night. I said, Jim Ed, who played bass on all your great records? And he said, all the Brown stuff, the real pretty orchestrated stuff, he said, that was all Bob. He said, Bob was on just about all of our records. And he said, if I was doing a real country record, he said, I would want to go, that's who I wanted, was Junior. He said, Junior could lay the beat just in the pocket a little more in a country record than what Bob would do. And I thought, man, that's really interesting, because Bob can sure lay a pocket awful deep himself, but Junior came to mind quite a bit with those guys too.
Well, I was gonna say in the chat where you're from, see where everyone's listening, watching from, and talking about Gurman. That's how pretty much I got everyone on this panel, because just me traveling. This is how I got the Nashville panel, because it's just like the guys that I know. So it's one of my things that I do when I travel. It's like, hey, come join the bass hang. But I was gonna say, well, we all just dreamed of having time off, and just to spend practicing and projects and time with family, but not exactly in this way. So I was just wondering what everyone's doing to just stay positive and motivated. What have you been listening to? And it's a huge question, but like my calluses have become from bass to gardening, and so I don't know, just in general, what are you doing to stay sane and motivated, and all that?
Everybody go.
Fishing. I've been fishing a lot. I've been trying to master the bait cast fishing rod, and getting pretty decent at it. I had a little flare up today, but and also I bought a boat, so I've been out on that quite a bit this summer with my son. That's been fun, but not playing a lot of music. I've done some sessions, and I thought that was going to be, a struggle, but fell right back into it. Hadn't been too much problem with that, but my calluses did wash off basically. So, but I hadn't had any kind of crazy practice regimen or anything like that. Just cutting the grass and unpacking boxes and going through, trying my lifelong pursuit of becoming organized is, maybe 1 inch closer. I don't know. Just going through my stuff.
Has anybody been playing the upright much, or has it been kind of gardening and home improvement? And I don't know.
Well, I'll throw in at that point. We obviously the other day, we panelists did a little sound check, and we kicked around a little bit of this. What have you been doing, and what are you doing, if anything, musically? And I made the comment then. I'll make it again. I've always, or at least for the longest time, I wanted to have time to just like take a sabbatical, for lack of a better word, and just put the phone away and sit down and do the dirty work of trying to become a better musician, not just a better bass player, but a better musician. And I am working my way into that now. Since the other day when we did the sound check, every day I've been playing a bit more. And for myself, I kind of have two parts to it, I think. One being I am making myself get down and deal with things that I've never dealt with as a bass player, as an upright bass player. And going back, playing really, really desperately slow tempos, seeing how long I can hold the note down and still have that thing ring on a bass that is not a very friendly instrument, I will tell you. And working on things like that, working on really trying to find the absolute center of the pitch and trying to play it right on, not sliding in or out of it, all of which is an impossible dream for me, but that's what I'm working on. Then at the end of the day, I come back to the bass, I put a drone on, and I'll just play long tones, fifths, just and not so much from a technical level. I find a certain emotional release at the end of the day doing that, and it makes me think about, again, the mystery of the instrument that we've all chosen to play, and the mystery of playing music, period. So I have my routines that I'm working on that are technical and ugly, just flat out ugly, not fun to do. But I feel like this is my chance to go back and do those things and hopefully come back a better player. At the same time, trying any way I can to, even just by myself, play with some emotion in hopes that we will get the chance to come back and play with other human beings. I'm sure we will. But anyway, that's what I got going.
I think that's really fascinating, Glenn. I'm glad you talked a little bit about what it was that you were specifically going after. I'm sure there's a bunch more too, and I would love to pick your brain about what you could possibly be trying to do better. But anyway,
it's an endless list. I promise you that. You're very kind to say, but it's endless, absolutely endless.
For me, those first. My last date was March 12th. I think that's a common date from what I hear from a lot of people, that date has come up as being, oh, that's the last show I played, or that's when I came home from my tour, or whatever. And in those early days, it, I kind of just threw myself into being outside and working in the garden or working my yard, planting, reclaiming parts of my yard that I haven't worked on for years because I've been so busy. And that part of it's a great thing. I was grateful that I was so busy and traveling and touring, working. But, I do love to garden, but just have had very little opportunity to do so. So at first it felt like this really very long snow day. And, it's like everyone's out of school and we all have a pass, and we can just do what we want. So I was just like out there doing that. But it was kind of a scary snow day because there was this gloom over us, that over me, and not knowing what was going to happen, and where it was going. I mean, I never dreamed that on August 1st I'd still be isolating and still be doing all this. I thought that I'd be, out doing what I was supposed to be doing this weekend, which is playing in France. And so, but anyway, I threw myself into my yard and my garden. I've had a shovel in my hands more than I've had a bass in my hands for the last few months. But after the first 8 weeks or so, when it was clear that nothing was going to come back pretty soon, and more of my years started going away on the calendar, I started realizing, okay, we need to start thinking about this long term and start thinking about how we're going to function and how we're going to create and feel like, we have something, as you said, Glenn, like at the end of this, like when we get back together and play again, I want to be in a different place musically than I was when I came in. I'd also like to lose 30 pounds too, but that's the harder thing. It's like you can't, I want to transform all these things, but we can only do so much. But musically, so I've been trying to take the time, but again, this has only just been in the last month or so, trying to create routine, trying to go after stuff with my playing that I had never taken the time to before. Some ear training, working on playing up the neck, bowing, and then I'm working on singing. Those are things that I've just never really, I just kind of fell into, and now I'm just trying to give some real study and attention to and time. But the most important thing that I'm working on is writing, is songwriting, and that's the thing that requires the most, for me, quiet. And by quiet, I mean just like not a huge expectation list in my head of things that I'm supposed to be doing, so that I can devote some real quality brain time to writing and songwriting. And so, and as you started this whole thing out with saying, we've sort of all wished for that time to be able to do this, and I have too. I've always wanted to be able to spend this kind of time working on these things, writing songs, playing, learning to play banjo, which I'm trying to also do. But I never wanted it to happen this way. But it is happening this way. So, so that's where we are.
Yeah, it's like the new norm for a while, for sure.
But I will just throw into, I don't want to, I'm talking too much, but I will say to all of the folks out there, like if you're, I saw a poll there, and it seems like there's a lot of professionals listening, And I will say that for me emotionally, it has been really, really hard. And I'm isolating. I have a home. I have a big home where my husband and I can, we have lots of space and we can be in different places of and have our time and our space to do our own projects. I have a yard. I have so many great things that I'm grateful for to go through something like this. And yet it's been so very hard emotionally to go through this. So there are days when I'm feeling really great and positive and productive, and then there are days when I'm totally not, and I'm not a functioning adult, and I'm struggling really hard with bouts of depression through this, and anxiety, and it's affecting my productivity. So I just want to say that because I think that's important for everyone to know. If you're struggling with something like that, it's good to talk about it. It's okay, and it's normal. It's I think if you're not having any of those things, that's amazing. I want to take what you're taking.
Amen.
Yeah, that's all of us for sure. You have these days where you clean the garage or do whatever, and then the next day it's like struggle to put pants on,
ADD really comes into play. Attention deficit, it's like, well, I think I'll take another break. Do something else. Crazy.
There are a lot of squirrels in my backyard. Huh? We got another, kind of related to that, actually. At least I would argue. A question from Carol here. It's near and dear to my heart. I have a significant background in movement disciplines and physical health maintenance. She says, my son plays upright bass but has had problems with hand pain and cramping. He's self-taught. Any recommendations, concerns about, she's concerned about long-term issues with the hand. I figure, I myself would offer some information about Alexander technique or any number of different movement disciplines. I can answer those, Carol, if you're interested. I'm happy to talk about that privately. But you guys, the panel, you guys have been playing for decades. There's so much experience sitting right here. You guys have been playing for so long and still at it. Have you had injuries? And if you have, how have you dealt with them? And if you haven't, how are you managing not to get injuries?
Well, let me throw one thing. Okay, Victor, you were going to go?
Well, I was just going to say that probably the first thing you could be just, like without necessarily seeing the bass in front of you. I mean, just making sure that the bass itself is doing you a favor. Just set up, nut height, strings, how old are the strings? How high is the bridge? Is the neck shape right for you, or is the fingerboard too thick? I think a lot of that's, just even outside of what a particular technique would, before you get into that, just is the instrument beating you up in any way? I had an instrument that I just recently got rid of because anytime I put it, started playing it, my pinky would go numb, and did a whole bunch of different things, and it was just probably just the neck shape. Neck shape in first position just was not designed for me, or I wasn't designed for that. So that can just, or even the height where you have it, the end pin out. Just depending on if you're, if you like to play this way or this way, which I'm kind of more down, but just any of those factors could be coming into play, which that could be causing pain. I've always had it up a certain way, and it's always kind of worked for me. And I don't have great left hand technique. I'm sorry.
No, that's
yeah. I always
good.
say your bass has got to work for you instead of against you.
Yeah.
That's Number one thing is to get it set up right where it is actually supporting what you're trying to do instead of you're battling and fighting it the whole time. It's physical enough as it is, you know.
Yeah,
it is. And that's a really important thing for anybody. I'm sure a lot of the people listening in, watching this, are professionals or at least very, very dedicated part-time players, but probably a fair number are relatively newcomers to the instrument. And it is a very physical instrument. And I read a great quote years ago with the great LA string bassist Chuck Berghofer, and he said, the interviewer asked him, so is it difficult to play the bass, the string bass? And he said, well, not really. I mean, you know, you work on getting your hand shape and you study where the notes are. And then you basically have to wait about 17 years before you get strong enough to play the thing. And he was being funny, but he was also being honest. It is a very physical instrument. It is an instrument you can't, I don't think you can walk away from it for a long time and pick it up and start right back up again. Because it does take physical strength as well as calluses and all that. The one thing I would throw in there with what the other two guys just said, I completely agree with that. My own thought is I began to struggle a great deal some years back with both my hands really beginning to hurt. I mean, just 24/7. And I thought, now how am I going to go forward? I want to get better at this thing, but I can't physically spend the time with it because this is killing my hands. I did something that my teacher told me many, many years ago. He said, get a mirror and stand in front of that mirror and look at yourself and see if you're doing something wrong. So I did that. And what I just blundered into is the concept. I'm sure you guys have already been past it and out the other end of it. But for me, it was kind of a revelation to see I was using my hand strength more than my body strength. When I look in the mirror, I thought, wait a minute, I'm not using any of the big muscles. I'm not using my shoulder. I'm not using my back. I'm not using the weight of either arm. And there is a way that you can put that left arm up in place and actually transfer the weight of your arm down into the fingerboard so that you're not doing it all with just your fingers and your thumb gripping the neck. And the same is true if you're playing pizzicato or bow. Either way, they always tell you, you got to put things in motion with your arm, not just your fingers, not just your wrist. And when I began to take myself apart that way, I was able to work through most of that pain. I have it again now that I'm trying to up how much I play all the time, but I'm just going to be very gradual and trust that I can work through it again now.
Yeah, I think just keeping track of your hands and stretches, and I think a good thing is to get a teacher too. Like find somebody if maybe you're doing a technique wrong and it's harder to unlearn it than is to learn it right. But well, I mean, thanks everyone. It's been really insightful. I don't know if anyone wanted to just kind of say any last words. I think for me, it's just like times like us just force us to do things that we've been wanting to do all along, you know, like spend time with our family. And just for me, just trying to make lists and like, when I get out of this, I'm going to continue to do this, you know, like I've been talking to my family more and just doing things that I've always been wanting to do. And like Victor Wooten always says, bass player is what I do. It's not who I am. It doesn't define my life. And I think this whole, you know, virus has just kind of put things in perspective of what's important in my life. And I don't know if y'all would want to just do a kind of final thing, and I can share some links of everyone that I have if you want to go. Missy and Victor have their own things. Yeah. Whoever wants to start, I guess, Kent, you're my first kind of.
Hell, I just, just try to practice a little bit every day. That's what I try to do with playing my bass, just at least touch it every day. And say it doesn't keep your calluses up, but at least having hands on the bass. I've actually had a little bit of work lately, a little session work come in, but nothing like normal. I think that's an important thing. Just play the bass every day. Hands on it. Helps me out quite a bit, mentally as well.
Victor, you want to say something there? I can share your link to.
Sure. Yeah, I think, I mean, it is not just a physical thing, but mentally, it's always nice to still be reminded that, oh yeah, this is what I do. And I was talking about, that famous, on when you're looking at this, it's being in this pandemic and being not able to do what you want to do at all the point, it's made you kind of reflect at all the times when you were working, in a kind of appreciative way, and how much we complain, that famous joke, how do you make a musician complain is to give them a gig, hopefully when we're out of that, that we're not, I bet that gig, that joke won't be quite as accurate once we jump back in, which at some point I know we will. Cross your fingers.
Yeah, it's funny, as a touring musician, you always think, well, I can't wait until the 15th because I'm going to be home for a week and I can get all this stuff done, and then I got to go out for 10 days or whatever, after that. And now it's just been completely flipped. It's like, I got a gig in September and I hope it happens, so. But I think, music is such a primal thing. It requires community, whether it's other musicians or playing for an audience. And I just don't really think that being online and playing music together or for people it's not a sustainable thing. It's just too disconnected. And for somebody who's spent the last 35 years playing music festivals where people gather together to hear music, I just don't think that it's just, you just make it just go away. And we have a pause right now. I always tell people that starting in the music business, I go, well, number one advice, save your money. And just remember that you're going to have some good weeks, some not so good weeks, some bad months, good months. I said, this is a bad year. This is not a good year for the music business, but hopefully you can find some inspiration to build on what you've done so that when it does come back together, you got something fresh, new, and a new perspective on everything. And I plan on being there when that happens. So, it's just a waiting game at this point. But, thankfully people are still making music and still recording and doing sessions and playing on online and stuff. So I think more than anything, you're going to see a lot of innovation come out, whether it's in travel or whether it's in performing music or whatever, in new environments with other people. A lot of interesting things will come out of all of this in a more sort of innovative sense, because this is what breeds innovation, is these sort of setbacks in life, And so I look forward to some of that stuff. But in the meantime, just going to keep doing what I do. I've run Sound Down Station In for some of their live streams. And if you haven't checked out, if you're a bluegrass fan, then Station In has their own TV live stream channel. And they stream both live shows and then archive shows as well every day on their channel on Facebook and their website, stationintv.com. So I've been down there doing sound, mixing sound for some of those shows and stuff, and playing a little bit. But we'll see what happens. I'm gonna, like I say, I'm gonna wait it out. I'll be here when they lift the curtain.
I hear you. Yeah. Well, Mark, you're next on my.
All right.
If you want to say something.
I just think we should keep encouraging each other. It's I'm like everybody else. I can get up some days and play all day long, and then take 5 days and just can't hardly get out of bed, you know. And I've been trying to stay in touch with buddies that, you know, that live in other states and stuff, and everybody's going through the same thing. And you know, I just think I'm going to kind of try to keep encouraging them and everybody and all of us. That's, you know, I'm just kind of taking one day at a time. It's kind of my thought. You know, I've been listening to a lot of Viktor's records, and you know, it's I've been wanting to do my own record for the last 25 years, and so this time it's given me some time to sit back and work on that, write some things, and program some things, and you know, that's a big encouragement. If I could do that for somebody else too, I mean, you know, that's what I want to keep doing until we do get to come back and play. But that's pretty much it. You know, I'm just like everybody else. A few little sessions, a lot of yard work, and you know, and that's it. Yeah, trying to clean out. But I think we're all having the same struggles. You know.
Yep. I look forward to hearing that album for sure.
Well, I don't know.
I'll start bugging you about that one for sure.
Well, Viktor's are so great. I've told you that before. I love those records so much. They're so musical, and they make you so happy when you know, they're just
nice. I didn't know that.
No, it really is.
Yeah,
you know,
some amazing
Missy's too.
stuff. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Both very inspiring for sure.
Yeah, very inspiring.
Missy, did you want to say something there at the end?
Well, I mean, I think everybody's really sort of tapped into all the right points, and Mark, I couldn't agree more that I think that's a really great thing that I'm glad you brought up about being there for each other and supporting each other and building each other up, because that's something that I struggle with too. When I it's part of the, you know, depression is to sort of like kind of get, you know, look in instead of looking out. And I think that it's important to remember to reach out to folks and not only for them but for yourself, and try to keep that going, because community is definitely a really healthy way to get through this. And I feel very lucky to have the friends that I have. One of the things that I've been doing too is using this time to actually try to listen to a lot of things that I haven't had a chance to listen to before at any great length. And so, and it may be new stuff. It may be stuff that's like just coming out right now, but it also may be like old stuff that I haven't listened to for a long time. So I'll just tell you that I've been gardening to a lot of Creedence lately, and and they're still the greatest band ever. I mean, and so, but I've also been listening to, you know, like a lot of Loretta Lynn and just a lot of different stuff, and then, you know, Fiona Apple's new stuff, and you know, so it's been a great opportunity to have that music come in. Because in my old life, in the before times, I wouldn't get a chance to listen. My head was always just filled with, you know, whatever I had to do the next moment, and so I didn't listen as much as I should. But now I have that time, and I'm grateful for that. And I think what Mike said too is that this is truly how stuff happens. You know, like how new things come about is because we're all sort of being forced to create. In some way or another, the innovation is gonna shine through from this, and there's gonna be a lot of really great things come out of it. And so I'm looking forward to being part of that. I'd spent, you know, almost all my career just playing bass for other folks, which I was very happy to do. And then I decided I wanted to start my own band. And the year that I started my own band was in 2008, the year of the recession. And of course, I didn't know that at the time, but it was a great business plan. And you know, to be out there trying to do that during the recession and what happened in those couple of years after. So it was a bit of a rough road to getting. It was a rocky road to get started, but but I don't regret that. And I kind of, this is not the same at all. But I do think about the fact that, you know, when there are challenges, all we do is just toughen up and get through them eventually. And I'm just really grateful to still be able to be here and working on new projects, and grateful to be amongst all of you.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, it's true. It's something about the bass player community too. It's just very just a great kind of community. Very, everyone's together. So I think just keep going with that.
We don't have to be in bands with each other.
Exactly. I'm going to put a PayPal if anybody feels like giving us some money to help us offset the webinar cost. You know, it doesn't have to be much. That'd be appreciated. It also can be Austin basshang at Gmail. But Glenn, if you wanted to say something about the.
I was just I wanted to throw in a little bit with what Missy said a little while ago, and a buddy of mine told me, we were talking about this when it was first kicking off, and nobody knew what this was going to be, this whole sequestered movement. And he said, well, whatever it is, he said, we'll never get this time back. And I thought, boy, that is the truth. So I think what we all need to do is try to be productive any way we can. And that doesn't mean professionally. That means taking the dog for a walk, laying on your back, look at the stars if you get the chance, whatever. It's all good. We will not get this time back, however long it lasts. The other thing I want to say that Missy touched on that I think is really important, and that is we all struggle with this because we don't know how to define ourselves, because we don't have our careers like we used to have them. We don't have our relationships, friendships on a daily basis unless we do it via the internet. So it's tricky right now to feel good about yourself some days, and depression is a real thing for probably all of us. So all that to say, I would say to all of us, let's try to be creative, let's try to be productive, but by all means, let's be prepared to forgive ourselves on any given day or any given week or any stretch of time where we're not doing real well, we're not being productive, we're not being clever, and just recognize that's going to be part of it. My own feeling that I will leave you with is that I don't want to go back to the world we had before this. I want to go back to a lot of it, but my hope is we will, as a species, we will find a better way to live. We will seize upon the things that are a lot more important than some of the bad habits our culture has gotten into through the years, and find out what's important, celebrate that, be industrious towards that. That's one great thing that musicians can do. And I will say, I know we all feel this way, if and when we get beyond the pandemic and there is a vaccine and or a cure, the whole world is going to be tearing the doors down to go hear live music again. We're going to have gigs if we just get through the other side.
That's right.
I'm coming to Nashville to hear everybody.
Come on.
Just the bass players, though. Expect all 6 of you to have a band together.
That's well said, Glenn. Yeah, I think just be positive, wear a mask, vote. Yes, just let's make the world a better place for sure. But appreciate everyone's time. It's really great hang. Yeah, like.
And thanks to you, Austin, and Ryan, for putting this thing together.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a great thing. Keep it going.
It's been a pleasure. Yeah, we're in lieu of getting together, we were like, all right, let's do it this way. So look forward next month. I don't know. Looks like people want to see Art of the Bow, so maybe we'll do that. But again, appreciate everyone, and thanks for everyone joining us, and appreciate the time. And Take care. Enjoy the beach.
Yeah.
Missy's out of here.
Even if there isn't one.
All right.
See
Take
ya.
care.
Take care.
Yeah.
Take care. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.